Ethan always said that living with Caleb was like living with a summer breeze, warm, easy, and impossible to ignore. We'd been roommates for nearly a year, and somewhere along the line, our friendship had grown closer than I ever planned. Not dangerously close, not inappropriate, just familiar. Too familiar, maybe, especially for someone who was already committed to a long-term boyfriend. I kept telling myself that everything with Liam was fine, even though our calls were shorter now, even though his texts came hours late, even though I felt more like an obligation than a partner these days. We used to talk about everything. Now we talk about schedules, bills, and weekend plans he kept canceling. He wasn't cruel or careless, just drifting. And the more he drifted, the more I noticed how steady Caleb was. Caleb had a way of appearing exactly when I needed someone. If I came home stressed, he offered to cook dinner. If I had a bad day, he'd sit on the balcony with me until I calmed down. None of it was romantic. None of it was intentional. But there's a kind of danger in kindness when your heart is already tired. That night began like every other. The soft in the refrigerator, the smell of fabric softener from the laundry he'd done earlier, and the glow of his desk lamp seeping underneath his door. I was reading on the couch when he stepped into the room holding a small tape measure and wearing a nervous, almost shy expression I wasn't used to from him. "Hey, a weird question," he said. "Can you help me with something? It's for my sports science assignment. I need to record measurements, but I can't get all the angles myself." I looked up confused. "Measurements? Of what?" He lifted the tape, then circled awkwardly. Just torso stuff, shoulders, chest width, back span. Nothing weird, I promise. My professor wants accurate numbers, and, well, my arms aren't quite long enough. It didn't sound inappropriate. It didn't even sound unusual. But there was something in his voice, soft, uncertain. I couldn't remember the last time he'd sounded shy around me. "Sure," I said, trying to keep it light. "If it's for school, no problem." He brightened instantly and motioned toward his room. I followed, telling myself this was normal. Roommates helped each other all the time. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt an odd tug in my chest. His room smelled faintly of cedar soap and coffee. He'd cleared a space near his desk, moving his chair aside, leaving just enough room for 2 people to stand. Caleb handed me the tape measure and stood in front of me. "Okay, so shoulders first." His voice was low, almost careful. I stretched the tape from one end of his shoulder to the other, tried to keep my hand steady. It wasn't intimate. Not really, but he watched me with an expression I couldn't name. Something tender, something quiet, something that made me swallow a little too hard. He exhaled softly. "Is it weird that I trust you with this more than anyone else? Even the guys from my program?" I shrugged, pretending to laugh. "I'm just holding a tape measure." "Yeah," he said, but the words sounded heavier than it should have. I moved to the next measurement, stepping behind him to check the width of his back. The room felt warm, maybe too warm. I could hear his breathing, slower now, steadier. My fingers brushed his shirt as I adjusted the tape, and he froze. Not pulling away, not leaning in, just freezing like the moment meant more than it should. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He nodded without turning around. "Yeah, just thinking." "About the assignment?" He hesitated. "About other things." That answer made something uncomfortable twist inside my chest. I told myself not to ask, so of course I did. "Like what?" He shook his head quickly, almost embarrassed. "Nothing important. Let's finish." I didn't push. I couldn't. The air between us was thick enough already. When we were done, he thanked me with a smile that didn't quite hide how tense he'd been. I nodded and left the room as calmly as I could, pretending the whole thing hadn't affected me. But lying in my bed later that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. I felt something in that moment. Something small, something quiet, but real. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't disloyalty. It wasn't anything physical. But it was emotional. And emotional things, they grow. As I finally drifted to sleep, one final thought crossed my mind, dangerous and uninvited. If a simple measurement could feel like that, what was happening between us? The next morning, I woke up with the uneasy awareness that something had shifted, like the apartment itself felt different, quieter, more careful. Caleb wasn't in the kitchen making coffee like he usually was, and his door was half closed, the light off. I stood there for a moment, wondering if he was avoiding me or if I was just reading too much into everything. Maybe last night had only felt strange because my mind was tired and my heart was stretched thin. Maybe I imagined that tension. Maybe it was nothing. I made myself coffee and sat at the table, trying to brush off the feeling when my phone buzzed. Liam. For a moment my heart lifted, hoping it was something sweet or thoughtful, something from the version of him I missed so much. Instead, it was a short text. We should talk later. I'm slammed today. We should talk. That phrase never came before good news. I typed back a simple, okay, then put the phone face down, trying not to let the disappointment swallow me. It was too early for emotional exhaustion, but I felt it anyway. A few minutes later, Caleb stepped out of his room. He looked like he hadn't slept much, hair messy, hoodie halfway zipped, eyes unsure. When he saw me, his step slowed. "Morning," he said softly. I forced a smile. "Hey!" He poured himself water, but didn't sit down, leaning against the counter instead. The silence grew thick between us, heavy with everything unspoken. Finally, he sighed. "About last night," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. I hope I make things weird. I wasn't trying to, I don't know, be awkward. "You weren't," I said quickly, too quickly. "I mean, it wasn't weird. I was just tired." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He opened his mouth to say something when my phone lit up again, this time with a short, blunt message from Liam. "Actually can't talk tonight either. Sorry." My chest tightened. I didn't mean to show it, but something in my expression must have slipped because Caleb stepped closer. "Hey," he said quietly. "What happened?" "It's nothing," I said. "Just Liam." Caleb didn't push, but his eyes softened. "Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated. I shouldn't vent to him. It wasn't fair. He wasn't my boyfriend. He wasn't my emotional safety net. And yet, he had always been the one who asked, the one who noticed. So I gave in. "It feels like we're stuck in this loop," I admitted. "He's always busy, always tired, always postponing everything. And I keep trying to be understanding, but I feel like I'm the only one trying." Caleb listened without interrupting, his brows drawn together in concern, not judgment. "You deserve someone who actually shows up for you," he said softly. "I know," I whispered, "but I also love him, and I don't know what to do with that." He nodded slowly. Loving someone doesn't mean you don't get to feel lonely. The truth of that hit harder than I wanted it to. I looked down at my coffee, tracing the rim with my fingertip to avoid meeting his eyes. If I did, I worried I'd find too much comfort there. The day passed slowly. Classes felt longer, conversations felt dull, and by the time I walked home, the sky had darkened with thick clouds threatening rain. When I reached the apartment, fat raindrops had already begun hitting the windows. The whole place felt dim, lit only by the glow from the hallway and the patter of rain. Caleb was sitting on the couch, legs pulled up, scrolling his phone with an unfocused expression. When he saw me, he set it down. "Storm's bad," he said. "Yeah." I answered, dropping my bag. Power might go out. Almost on cue, the lights flickered and died, leaving only the dull gray light from outside. Caleb chuckled softly. "Called it." I sat on the opposite end of the couch, and he turned on his phone's flashlight, angling it upward, so the room glowed faintly. The atmosphere felt strange, intimate, but not intentionally so. Rain hammered against the windows. Thunder rumbled, and the soft glow between us felt like a small world sealed away from everything outside. "I've been thinking," Caleb said after a long pause. My breathing hitched. "About what?" He swallowed, eyes fixed on the flashlight. "About why I asked you to help me last night." My heart thudded once, sharply. "Caleb, I know it was just measurements. I know it wasn't supposed to mean anything. But I asked because I wanted an excuse to be close to you, even for a minute." The room felt impossibly still, like the rain had stopped even though it hadn't. That wasn't fair to you, he continued. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to encourage him, but I also couldn't pretend I hadn't felt something too. Something small, something wrong, something real. Caleb, I whispered, we can't. I know, he said quickly. I know you're with Liam. I'm not trying to complicate your life. I just needed to be honest. The honesty felt like both a relief and a wound. I stood abruptly, unable to stay there with the weight of his words pressing down on me. I should get some sleep, I said, though it wasn't late. Long day tomorrow. He nodded, understanding more than I wished he did. As I walked to my room, my chest ached. Not because Caleb had confessed something, but because I couldn't deny how it made me feel. And that scared me more than anything. I woke up the next morning with a knot in my stomach, the weight of Caleb's confession lingering like heavy humidity. I wanted to pretend none of it happened, that the storm, the darkness, the closeness hadn't made the world feel smaller and more honest than it needed to be. But pretending was impossible. Something had changed, not in a dramatic, movie-like way, just in a quiet shift of gravity, the kind you feel rather than see. When I stepped into the kitchen, Caleb was already there. He looked different, not in appearance, but in posture, more careful, like he was afraid of taking up too much space. He offered a small, polite smile, the kind you'd give a stranger rather than someone who knew how you like your coffee. Morning, he said. Morning. The silence that followed was worse than any awkward moment we'd ever shared. It felt like we were both trying to protect each other from something. I'd busied myself making toast even though I wasn't hungry. He cleared his throat. Look, about last night. You don't have to explain, I said quickly. But I want to, he insisted, stepping a little closer but still keeping a respectful distance. I meant what I said, but I'm not trying to make your life harder. I don't want you to feel guilty or pressured. I just needed to be honest with you. You deserve honesty. I exhaled slowly. And you deserve boundaries. I replied softly. You didn't do anything wrong. I just can't go there. He nodded. I know. We stood there for a moment, both of us wishing we could rewind time to before things got complicated. But life doesn't offer rewinds, only choices. And the choice I needed to make became painfully clear when a knock suddenly echoed through the apartment. The sound startled both of us. Are you expecting someone? Caleb asked. No, I said, confused. But when I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Liam stood there. He looked tired, hair slightly messed, eyes heavy, shoulders tense. He held a small overnight bag in his hand, like he hadn't even planned this. He'd just shown up. Caleb immediately stepped back, giving us space. Hey, Liam said quietly. Can we talk? I nodded, letting him in. He walked past Caleb with a polite nod, then sat on the edge of the couch. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. Caleb silently slipped into his room, closing the door without a sound. Liam rubbed his hands together. I know I've been distant. I know I haven't been fair to you. I just didn't want to admit how overwhelmed I've been at work. I've been shutting down instead of talking to you, and I'm sorry. His voice cracked slightly, and guilt washed over me. I wasn't perfect either. I had let Caleb become the person I confided in, even if nothing physical had happened. I should have said something. I murmured, instead of pretending everything was fine. He looked at me with an honesty I hadn't seen in months. I don't want to lose you, Ethan, but I also don't want us pretending. If something's wrong, we fix it. Together. I swallowed hard. We can't fix anything if we keep avoiding the truth. He nodded slowly. Then let's be honest now. I hesitated, then forced the words out. I've been lonely, and I let someone else emotionally be there for me more than I should have. Nothing happened, but it still happened in my head. Liam didn't interrupt. He didn't accuse. He didn't get angry. He just absorbed it, letting the weight settle between us. Thank you for telling me, he said softly. I know that wasn't easy. It wasn't fair to you, I whispered. He took a deep breath. Maybe we need time, not to break up, but to step back and figure out how to actually show up for each other again. Time, space, healing. It felt both terrifying and relieving. I think that's fair, I said. We talked for a while about schedules, stress, expectations, the pieces of us that had been slipping through cracks we didn't even notice forming. There were no dramatic tears or slammed doors, just two people realizing they'd been quietly drifting in different currents. When Liam finally left, he hugged me gently, longer than necessary, but full of understanding. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. "Just don't give up on us." "I won't." After he was gone, I stood in the quiet apartment for several seconds before Caleb stepped out of his room. His expression was careful, searching. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said. It was honest. Hard, but honest. He nodded. "Good. You deserve clarity." I met his eyes, grateful but still conflicted. "And you deserve someone who isn't already carrying a whole world on their shoulders." He smiled sadly. "If you ever become free of that world, then maybe we can talk again. But for now, I'll keep my distance." His restraint, the maturity of it, made my chest ache in a different way. In the quiet that followed, I realized something important. Sometimes infidelity doesn't begin with a touch or a kiss. Sometimes it begins with silence, loneliness, and a moment you mishandle because you're human. As the rain outside finally eased into a soft drizzle, I knew one thing for sure. I had a lot of healing to do, and this time I needed to do it the right way.